I think that's a big thing for the public to realize is that the folks that are out managing lands and producing our food, it's a 24/7 job. It's exhausting. It's for sometimes little to no money, and I think it's the most important work there is.
Welcome to the On Land Podcast, the voice of stewardship in the American West. I'm Jake Lebsack with Western Landowners Alliance, and I'm excited to share a conversation I recently had with Chrissy McFarren, the owner of Badger Creek Ranch. Badger Creek Ranch is a family-owned operation in Cañon City, Colorado. They're dedicated to preserving the land's vitality and history, and in partnership with the Badger Creek Ranch Community and Full Circle Alliance, Chrissy and her team focus on education, restoration, and cultural legacy. Join us to learn more about Chrissy's work as a land steward and partner in the Badger Creek Watershed Partnership, which is working at landscape scale to restore the Badger Creek watershed. Now, let's begin. Wonderful. Well, thanks again, Chrissy. If you could just give us an overview of who you are, what you do, and where you're located.
Sure. So, Chrissy McFarren, director of Badger Creek Ranch, and then my husband and I are the owners of the ranch as well. He does a lot of the behind the scenes work at the ranch, and then I'm the boots on the ground side of things, and then he also has another full-time job as well. The ranch is located in south central Colorado. We are closer to Salida than we are Cañon City. Honestly, we're an hour from everywhere, but closest to Salida. So we are in the northwest corner of Fremont County and southwest corner of Park County. And just to say, the ranch, we're stewarding about 6,500 acres. It's a mix of private, state land board trust, and BLM land. We are a working ranch. We are raising our own beef, but we also do custom grazing for another rancher down in the San Luis Valley. We do some lamb, some pork, eggs. So we do direct market sales. We also do the farmers market in Salida, and we do a lot of educational programs as well. So we have a nonprofit component that runs alongside of the ranch, Full Circle Alliance, that supports all of our public interest work. So retreats, seminars, we have an internship program. So each season we take up to 4 young adults who are interested in getting into regenerative ranching. And then we also have guests that come out and stay with us. And so each week we have a handful of guests that are with us, and they go out and learn about what it means to ranch, what it means to be doing conservation work, to move cattle. In fact, we have guests here right now. We're getting ready to, when we're done with this call, we're taking them out on a wagon ride for a picnic. So it's a mix of fun and tons of work.
No, it sounds like a ton of fun. I am curious about the work side of this, though. What does it mean to you, to be a steward of the land, and how did you decide to dive into this world and pursue some of the work that you're currently involved in?
Yeah. I'm a first generation rancher, and honestly, I've always had I was born in California, so I think I've always just felt more at home in the West. And so when we came out in 2015 and got this ranch and got started, getting involved in this, I think for me, I started learning very quickly about what was happening in the West in regards to overgrazing and raising food. Was always passionate about this work. I raised meat back at our other farm in the Shenandoah Valley, and wanted to continue doing it, and just passionate about it, but also really passionate about the learning involved in what's involved to raise produce out here, to raise livestock, and then really got clear that this wasn't just about ranching. This was about conservation work. This was about healing work on the land, but also education for the public about what it means to raise, what it means to raise livestock, to ranch responsibly. So I got hooked in pretty quickly, and it feels all-consuming, and it's a ton of work, and I don't believe someone can do it unless they love it. So, yeah.
Sure. No, we hear that a lot. Totally understand.
Yeah. Sure. I was going to say, I don't think you've heard, this is not the first time you've probably heard this.
No, that's great. You mentioned it briefly before, but can you give us a better understanding of your watershed and how your property fits into it, and where you're located in the context of your land and water?
Yeah. So in this Badger Creek watershed, Badger Creek feeds into the Arkansas River down near Howard. It's a huge watershed, and most of the watershed is open rangeland. It's again a mix of private ranch property, BLM, state land board, some national forest. And so in regards to this group that's come together to work on this watershed, our ranch is kind of plopped right in the middle of it. Yeah, so we're right in the middle of this watershed.
Perfect. Can you tell me more about the project and how it came together?
Yep, the project, which is headed up by Central Colorado Conservancy, got started back in 2017. And I think the fascinating thing about this project is just the dynamic group of people that are involved, because you've got representatives from the Conservancy, you have 3 different ranches, you have representatives from State Land Board, BLM, National Forest. You've got scientists working on things, you've got biologists, you've got ecometrics who's in here designing a lot of the treatments that are being done. And so what they saw is that to start improving the health of this watershed, there was quite a few things that needed to be done. And one, the treatments done on Badger Creek itself were these little speed bumps that were being put in. So we've got some beaver mimicry going on. So you've got the slow and spread treatments, so that hopefully we're holding some of this water just enough to get it to spread. It certainly doesn't stop it. It just slows it down, which what I've seen after 10 years of living here is that we only get 10 to 13 inches of rainfall a season. But when it comes down, and it usually comes down in these massive storms, hailstorms, and it comes a lot of water all at once. So we get flooded quite quickly. So the hope is, how do we slow down the water, hold back the sediment, and keep it in our watershed, and then hopefully start to keep it, in our pasture lands, close to the creek in that riparian area. And so we've been tackling certain sections of the creek bed at a time. So like one section will be done on the BLM, and it's been done over the years. So last year, the riparian work was done on our section, on our ranch, in the area called the Old IM part of the ranch, which stands for Ira Mullick, who was the man who founded that part of the ranch. And then what ends up happening is at the end of the year, we'll all get together for a field day and come together and see the progress, see what's been done, talk about how did it go, what did we do differently, what's it, I think especially they really want to hear from the ranchers, like, what are we seeing that's different? And last year in particular, we did have quite a bit of moisture. So the watershed in that riparian area was quite lush. And it was good to hear from a couple of the ranchers who have been here for many generations that they said, they know that stretch, and they said they just haven't seen it look that good in years. So that was a good feeling.
Yeah, that's tremendous. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned some other projects or treatments in addition to the stream restoration part. Curious to know what those might be.
So the other part of all of this is the grazing. And honestly, I think the grazing is probably really the most important part of the restoration work. You've got a situation where we've got cattle who use this creek for watering, which that in of itself can be, you've got a lot of problems with water health from them just hanging out in the stream bed, erosion, and then they will completely overgraze that, right there close by the creek. So last year, number one, the ranchers worked together on grazing at different times, especially when the treatments were being done. It was like, hey, let's, instead of grazing in the spring, when the treatments are done, we'll graze in the fall, give it a chance to, like those willows, to get established. And then we brought in vents. So the virtual fencing, for us personally, they have some grant money for vents, collars. So last year I reached out to the Lore Foundation and talked about what I wanted to do, which was to get collars for the cattle so we can have exclusionary virtual fences around the areas where all this work is being done on the creek, so the cattle can't get in there and really undo thousands of dollars worth of work, and so that we can give it a chance and promote a situation where the cattle are going to be drinking from man-made watering points, which again, we've spent a lot of work getting other watering points in on pastures so that they don't have to be at the creek. So the Lore Foundation loved that idea. We got the grant, had collars on the cattle, and there's a lot of learning that goes with these collars. So while we were learning, we also managed to have some exclusionary areas around the work that we did, and it worked. It kept them off of it.
Happy to hear it's working.
Yeah.
We've had a number of really great conversations with some other lore folks. Always interested to hear what innovation is happening throughout here in Colorado and beyond. But curious to know kind of how your virtual fencing techniques and practices have evolved. Seems like there's a bit of a learning curve when folks get into this technique. So is that kind of a mission on your own, or is there a lot of knowledge sharing with other folks?
Yeah.
How does the partnership fit into this?
I think it's both. I mean, it's certainly, we didn't have to get into this, and it felt like the right thing to do. I mean, really, our long-term mission is how do we do the best we can do to help this watershed get back to a place that it was once before. Obviously, it won't happen in our lifetime, but hopefully we can keep these practices going. So we were interested in doing this work, and it's also been, as being part of this watershed work, it was something that I think all the ranchers are interested in doing. So it's kind of this both and, sharing knowledge, learning ourselves, but then we've also been in a place of wanting to share that, what we're learning with anyone else who's interested, as far as landowners, other ranchers, anyone else that's, involved in all of this conservation work and land restoration work. So it's a huge learning curve. So I think last year it's learning about how does it work. There's the whole technical aspect of it. There was learning about getting the collars on the cattle properly. There's building the base station, because this is a satellite system. So we had to build the base station, get that installed. And then starting to learn how does it work with solid fences. So you first training them to solid fences. And then once the cattle are trained, it's starting to experiment. And for us, it was experimenting with building exclusionary virtual fences around all these treatments that are done and keeping them off of the creek bed. And this year, I think our next step, now that we're starting to get a little bit more adept at using it, will be with grazing, because we've got huge pastures. I mean, and that's the thing up here in this open range. Like one pasture might be 2,500 acres. So, and if there's an area last year that perhaps the cattle, like a corner, that it's like, wow, they seem to hit that harder than another area. We're going to put a virtual fence around that and keep the cattle off of that whole section of the pasture, let that rest, and really, again, encouraging them to graze parts of a pasture that they just haven't grazed yet. And really, the possibility is, and this is being done with vents, is that you can use a virtual fence and literally move your cattle, and have them graze a section of your pasture, and then you move your virtual fence, and this is all done on the computer, and now they're going to go graze another area, and you're keeping them off of the pasture that they graze. So, I mean, the possibilities are endless as far, the possibilities of where we can go with it. And I think, but we're also realistic that each year is going to be something new, and we're going to learn something more about it. And it's certainly experimental right now, but we're happy with it. We really are.
Can you tell me more about the role of community when it comes to this watershed restoration work?
I think as far as neighbors, I think what's been interesting, because we're flanked by the two big ranches, but then there's also some, smaller holdings in the area. And we've certainly been meeting more and more neighbors that have small, 40 acres and oftentimes we meet them because they might be out walking on the ranch, and it's like, hey, how you doing? And just starting to have conversations about what we're doing. And for us, it's really about having an open gate policy of, for example, we have a big event coming up on August 24th of inviting all of our neighbors to come to listen and hear about what we're doing. For me, I think that is my biggest passion, is how to create community, how to be a ranch that our main goal is to become a working ranch education center. So we want to have the possibility where people can come here for classes and for projects and be part of it, whether you might be a student or you might have 40 acres down the road of coming to learn about, and we'll bring in facilitators so that we have the expertise here for people to learn about land stewardship and conservation work and soil health. So I've really been in a place of trying to get involved as many different projects as we can that benefit our ranch, but hopefully provide education for the entire community so it can be shared. My belief is that our biggest downfall with a lot of this is education and just getting that education out to the public. I think that unfortunately there's a lot out there that cattle are the problem. I think I hear that a lot, and I think that's very unfortunate. I think done properly, cattle are the solution, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it here, and that's why it's like inviting the public. Come on, I know you may have heard that, but just come take a look for yourself.
So you mentioned the need for more public education, and maybe to fill in some blanks for other farmers and ranchers that might be interested about this. When you dove into it, what were some of the resources that you leveraged? What were some of the things that helped you learn? And where might you point other folks, other producers who are interested in learning more themselves?
I started just going to any conference I could go to. NRCS has been fantastic as far as, opportunities, and, we were involved in an equip project, and they really helped with our teaching us about a prescribed grazing plan. So they've been phenomenal. And then the Quivira Coalition, I highly recommend. Just a wealth of information and webinars and I mean, it's really endless. And we're involved right now with their Soil to Supper program, which is being one of the ranches that's going to be a demonstration ranch for composting on open rangelands. I mean, there's podcasts and books and documentaries. I mean, even before moving west, I was pretty obsessed with learning everything that I could. And we were doing a little bit back on the East Coast, learning through Joel Salatin's work as far as livestock on the ground for soil health and rotation of different species. And his farm was only 2 hours from where our farm was in Virginia. So we actually went out to a lot of his classes. So for me, it was pretty amazing. Like, go to a conference, learn, meet people, network. Okay, where do I go next? It's a breadcrumb trail, which to me is the most exciting part, is the networking and learning and moving on, like, oh, that was fascinating. Now I want to go learn about this. But that's me. That might not be everybody else, but I have a thirst for it. And then trying to figure out, well, like, what's a practice that's a good fit for where we are at high altitude, open range, arid environment. What could we possibly do and differently, or and the land is teaching us a lot. I mean, I would really say the land is our greatest teacher, and we can see areas where it's like, okay, we need to do something different here or more. It's a humbling experience.
Out of all these treatments, where have you seen the most significant progress, and what did those results look like?
Honestly, I think the prescribed grazing has had the most reward, and we're in close to the headquarters is where we have our horse pastures, and we are using electric fence paddocks. A lot of times that's done with cattle, as far as the smaller paddocks and moving them, like every day or every couple days. And we're doing that with our horses. And I've really seen, and horses can be hard on pasture. So we're making our strip paddocks with the horses and moving them every few days and seeing a huge improvement there, because horses can overgraze pretty quickly. So that's been like, yep, that is working well. And I think the other piece is we've worked hard to get water points throughout the ranch. So we worked with NRCS to get a QUIP project to get water points throughout. We've gotten a couple other water points, working with a Habitat Partner program. So we've gotten, some grants, but then we've also contributed to get these water points. And these water points are on parts of pastures where there hasn't been water for years and years and years. So these parts of the pastures really needed to get grazed. And we were just out yesterday, and even our guests, we were riding with our guests, and granted, this one couple, they're farmers out in Iowa, but they were like, oh my gosh, this pasture looks amazing. So it was, they're from Iowa where they have tons of water and grass. So I was like, yeah, I think so too. It's just really, it actually this one portion looked like prairie. We're short prairie up here, but I was like, even with the short prairie, to see it waving in the wind was a good thing. So I think that we're starting to see results, and again, we're in our 10th year, and I think, who knows what's possible.
Can you outline some more of those challenges that you're hoping this work can remedy, and just how important things like rotational grazing, or stream restoration, how these things fit into the broader question of keeping lands intact, keeping lands working, and why people maybe beyond the fence should care about that?
I think, and there's so many different theories. Like, I think a lot of times, unfortunately, there is a theory like, just let land be wild again, the rewilding, which, in and of itself is a beautiful idea. But I do think that humans are part of managing this piece of it. Like, we've always been part of it. And so we were part of the problem of how everything got to this condition. So I think we need to be part of the solution as far as how do we do the most that we can do to help open lands stay open, but also help them stay healthy given the challenges that we have, with climate and weather and drought and then issues with water and lack of water. We've got to manage resources to the best of our ability, and that affects everybody. And I think, to me, that's part of the problem is everyone kind of gets in their own little bubbles. And if you live down in town and it's like, well, that doesn't really affect me, and it's like, well, actually it does. Like, we're all connected, we're all part of it. We're all using the same resources. And a lot of times, whatever resources we have are, whether it's water is kind of, is flowing down, or, the management of the lands around affect the management of what's happening in towns. So I think we have to think about this differently as one whole big ecosystem and not all these tiny, where everyone's separated from one another. And it really is, and we have to be thinking about it for the next generations. And I really do appreciate that thought of managing for the next 7 generations. And I think the problem has been, unfortunately, there's just short-sighted thinking and a lot of greed, unfortunately, and maybe just a lot of not caring or sleepwalking amongst a lot of humans. And I think we all need to be part of the solution for the next, and we owe it to the next generations that are coming if they're going to have food. And I think it's a big problem, and maybe it's such a big problem that it overwhelms people, and so they just stick their heads in the sand and tune out. And my hope is to educate people in a way that, it doesn't have to be so overwhelming. There's a way that everybody could get involved in helping, even if they don't ranch or manage large pieces of land. Even if they enjoy the same public lands that we're grazing on, one small thing I can mention is when you enjoy the same lands that we graze on, shut the gates. Just please shut the gates. I can't tell you one of the biggest challenges in ranching on public lands that we have. Luckily now we have fence collars, so that helps, but people go through areas that they're not supposed to go through, and they'll literally just leave gates wide open, and then cattle get out, and they're, so there's just some courtesy things that can happen that help ranchers who are ranching on public lands. So I just think there's ways that we can all come together to be part of the solution of helping the health on these big open rangelands. And I think it does affect everybody. I think that's a big thing for the public to realize, is that the folks that are out managing lands and producing our food, it's a 24/7 job. It's exhausting. It's for little to no money. And I think it's the most important work there is. And so, my biggest hope is to inspire the public. If they could do one thing differently, is go to the farmer's market and buy local produce, local meat from folks that are doing this work, because if we're not supporting them, they can't make it. And so, and they're, while they're growing food, they're managing huge expanses of pasture lands, and it's really quite remarkable. I mean, I really hold farmers and ranchers in the highest esteem, and so my hope is to wake the public up to that and encourage them, if they could just do one thing differently, would be to use their dollars and purchase locally grown produce and meat.
As you work to address these things and kind of do your part in all of this, what is the direction of the Badger Creek Watershed Group and the collaborative, and what's the future look like there?
I know that we, our ranch, we're going to continue to be working with the fence collars, continue to be working with all of the prescribed grazing, looking at and really starting to look at what else can we be doing as a ranch to help with the health of the watershed that goes through our section of the ranch. And I know for us, it's going to be continuing to look at our main objective, which is becoming an education center. So what more can we be doing there to get that, like make that more robust, a more robust internship program, and then learning about what other practices could we be doing to help, help with the watershed and just erosion issues that we have on the ranch. So for us, it's keep going forward, keep learning. And keep working and honestly collaborating with Central Colorado Conservancy and all the rest of the group to see, what's next. And I do know the monitoring continues. There's a ton of monitoring that's happened with this as far as collecting of data. So I know that's continuing on. So I'm honestly, curious as well as what lies in the future for this work.
Well, it's great you brought that up. Segues nicely into this next question. As you're tracking your progress, what are those metrics that you're tracking, and how are you doing it?
Well, one thing that's really helpful is that we have our grazing plan. So we have the grazing plan that we start out in the spring of here's our plan, and I know I try to change things up. Like if we've grazed one pasture one specific time in the season, it's like let's switch things around so that we're not grazing the same area the same time every season. So then we create our plan, and then I'm tracking. Basically, I've just got this huge whiteboard, and I'm tracking when we've moved everybody, and then I go back and make a grazing plan of what actually happened and comparing. And making notes about, well, we moved, animals early or we kept them on later. Why did we do that? Because if I don't write it down, I'll forget it. We have photo point monitoring, which we've done for the last 3 years. So we have photo points around on all the pastures. So we take pictures before grazing, pictures after grazing. And then we have a couple other ways of just, a lot of it's making notes about the season and conditions and keeping a log, really, so that we can go back and try and remember, like, did that, if we're seeing something like, did that look like that last year? And then we can go back and look at pictures or look at our notes. And I think that's super important because again, when we're gone, whoever's managing can have almost an archives of data. And granted, it's not necessarily scientific. So much of it really is intuitive and organic, but they still have pictures and notes to go off of, and I think that's really that's essential. And I do know that they have lots of computer data that they've collected. The Watershed Group has lots of, just computer data and graphs that they have for, stream flows and seeing what's happening after rain events. So I think that information is absolutely fascinating. And certainly that influences some of what we're doing too. I think that's kind of the fascinating thing about it is it's all tied together. And sometimes we're left with big questions of like, I wonder if this is happening because, and that's all we have is a question and a curiosity about like, wow, I wonder why that's happening. And we don't know yet, but I think that's part of what makes it really exciting is that, again, it's where I think we become the students of the land, and the land is trying to teach us about what needs to happen. And oftentimes, it's kind of like, I don't know, well, let's maybe we graze this part differently, or and sometimes we'll see like, oh my gosh, that worked really well. So it's such an organic process. And like I was saying, definitely a humbling one. And I don't think I've ever learned more in my life than I have in these last few years.
Well, I always think it's interesting how that qualitative and quantitative information and data plays off of each other. And you mentioned it before, but I think this might be a great opportunity to maybe plug with a little more detail the event that's upcoming in a few weeks. So what does that mean? What are you hoping to accomplish? Who's going to be there? And how does it all fit into the work you're doing?
On Saturday, August 24th, 10 to 4, we're having an open gate field day opportunity. It's free for the public. The biggest plug I'd like to put in is that it's made possible by the Lore Foundation, first and foremost. They reached out and said, hey, we've got this grant for a storytelling grant opportunity to do something to talk a bit more about the project from last year, the vents collars and repair and restoration work. And I thought about it and I was like, God, that would be why not do that? Why not have everybody out? Every year we normally do an open gate where we have folks out, and it's kind of more food, square dancing, some tours, and then this year it's really more about the education, about the restoration work. It's an opportunity to hear from the ranchers that are involved. What are they seeing? Especially the other two. As I said, this is my first go around with this ranching, whereas the other two are multi-generational ranchers, and so they know this land well, and so it's to hear from them. And to hear stories about the land from the ranchers. It's to hear from some of the folks involved in this project. And then it's also, we have our other sponsors, including Western Landowners Alliance. And so you're going to hear a bit from them about the work that they do. We will have some tours that will go out to 2 spots on the creek bed so people can see for themselves what it looks like, and have somebody there talking about, the willow plantings and these little speed bumps that slow down the water, and they can see the vegetation for themselves. And I think we're going to have our horse-drawn wagon that will take folks out to some of these spots. We also will we're going to make up a lot of chili, and everyone will have an opportunity to have some of our grass-fed beef in some chili. And the main intention with having this be free to the public is for education, so that folks from the community, other landowners, anyone who's interested can come and network and talk to people, and hopefully we inspire other people to try doing things on the property that they have. And again, I think, even folks who have, there's a lot of 40-acre parcels, like even if they could be educated about grazing differently, because unfortunately what happens is a lot of times those parcels get overgrazed pretty quick and turn into dirt. So even if they said, oh, wow, I could actually get electric fence and do rotational grazing on my little 40 acres, and that sure makes a difference. So, yeah, the main intention is to inspire, educate, and network.
Thank you so much again for taking the time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the On Land podcast. Thank you so much to Chrissy for taking the time to talk about all the work happening across the Badger Creek watershed, her missions of education and building community, and the role stewardship plays in sustaining her way of life. To find show notes for this episode and others like it, check us out at onland.westernlandowners.org. Thanks for listening, and I hope you will join us next time when we talk with other voices of stewardship in the American West.